Coach, I saw you talking with Vance Joseph earlier on your radio show on Sirius XM. How cool is it for you to have one of your former players as a head coach? And I imagine you may have had some more. I don't know. I guess, is he the first?
First one to be an NFL head coach, absolutely. He is, the model citizen. He did everything right as a player, never got into any trouble, was a great student, was a team guy, just one of those, consummate great kids that you knew was going to be destined for great stuff. The fact that he was able to go from quarterback at Colorado to go play defensive back in the league shows not only his athleticism but also his work ethic and his ability to keep trying, because that's no easy transition. And then to use his great intelligence to develop as a defensive coordinator, not an offensive guy, even though that was the side of the ball that he spent most of his time on, at least growing up, I think also speaks to his willingness to put himself through things that aren't easy. So, listen, there's nothing easy about being a head coach, but he is absolutely as well suited as anybody I've been around to do the job and do it very, very well.
Well, building off what you said, a guy that grew up playing quarterback, came to college to play quarterback, has to move to DB to have a shot in the league, but then he becomes intimately familiar. That puts him in pretty rare company. I understand. I mean, you've been around a million coaches that may have grown up playing one thing that have had to jump to the other side of the ball, but how unique is that, I guess, or how much will that help him in terms of building blocks to handle the entire thing that being a head coach really is about?
Every experience that he's had will help him being a head coach, because it's a people business. Relationships with players, relationships with coaches, now as the head coach, relationship with ownership, general managers, all those who come to work on a daily basis to try to make the Denver Broncos better. Those are all going to be cornerstone relationships to help move the organization forward, and he's great at that. He's a people person. Obviously, his acumen as a football guy, he'll have, and I asked him this in my own interview, he'll lean on that defensive side of the ball. That's where his expertise is. But he's also got to make sure that he's managing all facets of what the head coach needs to do. And I couldn't be happier for him, number one, because he's coming back to Colorado. I know how much Denver and the state of Colorado revere the Broncos. He's got Matt Russell, a former teammate of his, in the front office, kind of watching his back. John Elway's proven to be a savant in the general manager role, just as he was as a quarterback. It's a magical opportunity for him, and got my fingers crossed that all goes well.
Well, you made that, I guess every coach makes that transition from position coach, coordinator to head coach, and I was talking with Vance a little earlier about how different his offseason has been and will continue to be, and then once he gets into the regular season, his routine changes pretty dramatically.
Right.
How much of a challenge and how well do you think he'll handle essentially coaching the coaches? That's what a head coach does most of the time.
There's two facets of it. One is, as you just say, coaching the coaches, getting them to do what you want them to do, and doing it willingly, all for one for all type style. And then two, the trust component. The most important thing a coach does, and it's amazing how often we hurry through it, because when you get named, you immediately have this feeling like you're behind. Everybody else is 100 miles ahead of me, I got to catch up. And so you rush through the hiring process, and it's the most important thing you do, because those guys are extensions of you, and when they go to meeting rooms and you're not there to listen, they've got to be preaching what you're preaching. Otherwise, they're pulling in another direction, and obviously a boat that's got oars going in different directions is going nowhere. So in talking to them, I believe they took the painstaking amount of time to get it right. I know he feels very comfortable with the guys that he's got in position. Mike McCoy, their offensive coordinator, he feels he can turn it over to, so he can spend more time on the defensive side of the room, because that's where his expertise lies. But and Mike's a former head coach to help him, if there's things that come up that maybe he hasn't dealt with, because there's no book, Head Coaching 101. You've got to write it yourself as you go. But I just think his people skills will always come back to doing the right thing, being honest with people, being upfront, and trusting his instincts. That's the one thing. I always told people who ask, what's the key? You're going to make mistakes. There are going to be problems. There are going to be nights where it's hard to sleep. When you're not sleeping well, make sure it was your mistake, not somebody else's. Make sure it was you who is the one that is the reason we lost that game, rather than somebody else that you gave that opportunity to wasn't ready for that opportunity.
All right, I got two more for you. You said you thought he'd be great at whatever he did. Did you think he'd get into coaching, become a head coach, and become an NFL head coach? Did you see that Vance way back when?
Like I said, I did not know that coaching was in his future. I did not know that was an interest of his. We didn't have that conversation. But I will tell you this, if you would have asked me back then, will Vance Joseph rise to the top of whatever industry he wants to get in, I would say absolutely.
All right, and then final thing, to truly rise to the top means you got to win. Now, he's got a pretty good head start.
Denver will have nothing less. The expectations there have always been the same since I got to sit next to Pat Bowlen in a couple games. I mean, they love their Broncos. From Orange Crush all the way on, this is the expectation is to take it to the very top. And nothing would please me more than to see Vance Joseph holding the Vince Lombardi trophy.